approve tonight's agenda?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Stacy.
And I'll second it. Meg.
Thank you, Meg. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Is that because I probably...
That was approval of the agenda.
Oh, thank you. I was still looking up information about the other question.
I think it's unanimous. All right, approval of consent agenda. And tonight we're going to take these items one at a time. So we're going to do item A, approval of August 16th, 2022 Board of Education retreat meeting minutes. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to accept the August 16th Board of Ed retreat minutes.
Thank you, Meg. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Stacy. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any abstentions?
One.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
Item B, approval of September 6th, 2022 Board of Education meeting minutes.
Motion for approval.
Thank you, Tim. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, thanks, Kim. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Were there any abstentions on that? No, because you don't have to. You're
Okay,
absolutely
then.
okay to vote on that. Okay, great. It's unanimous. Item C, approval of out-of-state field trip PHS cross-country to Randolph Center, Vermont, September 30th, 2022.
Make a motion.
I heard Meg first.
Yep.
Tim, would you like to second
I'll
that?
second that.
Thank you. Is there any conversation and discussion? Nope. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. And item D, approval of out-of-state field trip PHS business class to East Rutherford, New Jersey on October 18th.
Well, I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Meg. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thanks, Dave. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. All right, thank you, everybody. Let's move on to our audience of citizens. Do we have any comments from our online audience? No. And I think we're ready for the Portland Public Schools Spotlight. And tonight we're going to hear about the Portland High School student workers.
Yeah, I figured, you see these folks all the time, but you may not be aware of what they're doing or what they're a part of. So I thought this would be a great opportunity to let Dylan tell you a little bit about the folks behind the computer screens over there.
Hey, so I'm Dylan Bernard, high school CTE teacher, as well as the class advisor of 2026 yearbook and National Honor Society. And in my spare time, I supervise these wonderful students. So we started holding on student interns back before the pandemic happened with Dr. O'Reilly. And as soon as the pandemic hit, we were able to pull on a couple more. So if Tori, you could share the slideshow. The first official set that we had were actually Grace Darby and Lila Delaron from the class of 2020. And as they started working with us, getting the different Board of Ed meetings, and then all of the other like back to school COVID meetings, the open houses, all of those, we quickly realized we were overtaxing them and we needed to bring on a couple more. So we brought on quite a few more. We had 2 members of the class of 2022 and quite a few from the class of 2023. So this picture is of all of the interns as of last year who were also either in line to be announcements director or currently my directors. Most of the students who you see behind the screens here are involved in the morning announcements crew in some way, shape, or form. Quite a few of them have been involved for all 4 years. Tori actually is one of our special cases. She joined with Mr. Toussaint back in middle school on 7th grade and has been with us ever since. So Mr. Toussaint is very proud that she is my director this year. And Jenna is her assistant director who will be taking over next year. Caitlin Tripp is another one who has been with us. I've always had a Tripp, I've always had a Darby, and I've always had a Bailey. And next year I'm going to have none of them, so Jenna, you choose to fill. You can go to the next slide. So this is pretty much where they get most of their training. And here you'll see Ava Evison and Camille Kopaz, two of our other student interns who do more of the stuff at school than Board of Ed. They have conflicts of sports and work and whatnot. But pretty much our morning announcements runs daily. It's pretty student run. And most of the student leaders like Tori and Jenna have extensive training on every single one of the pieces of equipment. So if anyone is ever out, they could easily fill in. Or if we are bringing in freshmen, they could jump in, train them, work with them, help them out. Whether I'm in school or not, as long as Tori is there, I'm pretty comfortable with announcements going on. I watch from home, and there's usually no issues. You go to the next one. In here, you can see Tori actually working last year when she was training. Some of them, and we have a pretty extensive group. I want to say it was like 35 kids who are on the announcement team. You go to the next one. And here you can see Jenna actually working with a group of kids as well. In addition to morning announcements, Board of Ed, they also do things like anytime there's an event like graduation, any concert that needs live streaming, or anytime anyone just needs someone up in the booth in the auditorium. Mr. Tucker will reach out to me and I'll reach out to them. Some of them will volunteer. If it's during school, they'll pretty much get community service hours. After school, they'll be able to be paid for it. But they're pretty independent up in the booth or in the studio or even here as far as working all the different technology and equipment and whatnot. At the moment, we have 6 of them. And I believe we just brought on an additional one to help fill the void for one of them that had left. So you'll start seeing Vinny in the next couple of days. He'll be coming in and joining us. And yeah, so this is Tori. She's a senior this year. She's my lead director. Jenna is a junior. She's the assistant director, and all the rest have various roles and do a really wonderful job.
Thank you for you guys doing. Are you enjoying it?
Yeah, I want to know what your favorite part might be of being involved in this tech team. What do you like best?
There's a lot about it that I like getting to learn, like all of this kind of stuff was new technology for me, so getting to learn it was really interesting, and then getting to hear some of the Board of Ed stuff was definitely cool to listen in on.
Nice.
Yeah, definitely listening in on the Board of Ed meetings is really cool. I also like working up in the booth, like during presentations or class meetings.
Do you guys have any career aspirations in this area?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I'm not sure at
Maybe?
this moment, but definitely possibly.
Good.
So far, I've had one, Lila Delaron from the class of 2020. She started in 2 of my video production courses, took those her freshman and sophomore year. Junior year, she took an independent study in video production. Senior year, she took an independent study in yearbook. On top of doing all this, and then she went off to film school, and last I heard, she was having an amazing time, lots of fun. Tori is actually kind of following suit. She's in an independent study this year, where we're trying to work the drone into that component as well with yearbook curriculum and whatnot.
Thank you, guys.
That's my question,
Yeah.
career path.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. And the drone policy, it's up at Cape, they're working on it, so it will come. I'm following it up.
Are there any other questions?
Thank you.
No? Well, thank you for the presentation, and thank you both for
Anytime.
thank
your
you.
dedication to this.
Good job.
All right. Shall we hear from our student representatives? There they are. Good evening.
Hi. So the class of 2023 held the dodgeball tournament this morning. It was a very exciting fundraiser. It was probably one of my favorites. A majority of students got involved as well as teachers. This fundraiser was an opportunity for the class to raise some money as well as provide an opportunity for students to participate in activities during their mentor block. Along with that, the PHS band will be traveling to the Big E on this Friday. The band's been working very hard since the beginning of the school year. They've been working on their marching technique and adjusting to the band. They are had the freshman elections last week on Thursday. It was a success. Officers were appointed Friday afternoon. And when it comes to fall sports, the swim team, cross country, boys and girls soccer, and volleyball did very well. And the football team is once again undefeated so far this season.
It's exciting.
Thank you.
Thank you both. All right, communications and updates.
All right, so let's see. Couple of communications for you. One, we did receive a letter of pending retirement from Marlene McKinley. Remember, Marlene has been with us for 25 years, so this will be her last year. And she let us know now. I know we're all looking forward to celebrating a very successful and long and storied career here in Portland. So Marlene is going to finish out the year with us, but she did put in her letter of retirement, and of course I know that we're all going to look forward to celebrating with Marlene as we head into the end of the year. Couple of communications. I'm glad Eric is here for the first one. So finally, we received the commitment of funding that we needed from the federal emergency connectivity funding, and we need that work through our E-Ray consultant. And it was caught up in some bureaucracy. Sometimes the wheels of the federal bureaucracy turn a little slower than we might like. But just this past week, we finally got the commitment. So we now have $169,480 from the one tranche of funding. That is going to be used to purchase Chromebook cases, licenses, warranties, and then some other desperately needed hardware such as smart boards, projectors, desktop computers, and chargers. We just got that information, last week, right, Eric? Just last week. The funding is in place, and Stephanie is now in the process of cutting all of the POs and working through what we need to do to allocate that funding. In addition, we also found out that we have received the $77,130. That would be a direct payment for 370 new Chromebooks, which is going to go a long way towards funding our Chromebook replacement cycle. So very exciting, both of those pieces of funding came in. They are here, finally. We have the POs ready to go, and otherwise, Eric, when do you think we would expect to start taking delivery of all those
So
things?
unlike the first round, that grant application required us to have a vendor and devices lined up because of the bureaucratic delays. That vendor is now out of those devices, but they're awaiting a new shipment of inventory that we're waiting to hear from them an exact date. They anticipated no more than 2 to 3 months. So unfortunately, a little bit of a delay, but nothing we can do. The government was slow to get us the money.
Hey, we don't look gift horse in the mouth.
That's right.
We're very happy to have that funding, very excited to get the POs going and have all of that hardware and software, hardware and Chromebooks come in. And thank you to Eric and Stephanie and Tom and everybody who pulled together to get this grant out as quickly as it came in. And we're very excited to have that funding in place.
And all of our
students, certified staff, and paraprofessionals have functioning devices. When we get these in, this is just going to help us push out some of our older ones.
So just a quick question, can we get an inventory of where we are? Because we did have the inventory a couple of years ago, which indicated how many were out of warranty and were old. Can we get that updated with all the new additional?
Yep. We're working on it now and working on it in advance of what will need to become an LEA-funded replenishment cycle moving forward. We are very fortunate to have grant-funded replenishment, but we know that that's a burden coming onto the LEA, assuming there's no additional money from the sky.
Right. And of course, that's all going to be shared with you when we develop the budget.
Right.
Right. So, as we go through, now that we've had the lease and this round of funding, we're in pretty good shape, but of course, the future gets here before we know it, so we need to make sure that we keep up with that replacement cycle. So, very pleased to share that with you. Another very good piece of news tomorrow night, the Board of Selectmen is going to take action to vote to enter into a contract with SLR Architects. This is the firm that's going to come in. They actually came in, the bid was lower than we anticipated, which was nice. So they're the firm that's going to come in once that contract is executed and do the core sampling and the specs that we're going to ultimately be using to bid out the replacement of the track. All the funding is in place, all the commitments have been made. I think the last piece of the pie now, in terms of phase 1, is securing that architect firm contract and moving forward with the project. I'm still optimistic that we'll have this done by next fall. So between
Fingers crossed.
this fall, winter, spring, we still have quite a bit of work to do, but we're gonna keep our fingers crossed that this time next year, we see a new track in the final stages, hopefully, of being completed. So I'll keep you posted on that. Those are two very good pieces of news. So another very good piece of news, I shared with you in your board folder, I just put it in there tonight because literally we just got it. If you remember in the last legislative session, a piece of legislation was passed that committed the state to funding HVAC upgrades in public schools, right? The pandemic has taught us a lot about the importance of breathing clean air that's appropriately circulated and filtered, and also, of course, air that's appropriately heated and air conditioned, right? HVAC for sure. So the state has allocated $150 million in grant funding for schools to use to upgrade HVAC systems. Learning more about this grant, a couple of things we know already is that the application is due December 1st, right? So it's going to be quick. We're going to be moving very quickly on this. I am going to be attending a webinar on September 30th, and we'll likely very quickly thereafter get the Buildings and Grounds Committee together to share some proposals with you. The good news is that we are very well positioned to do this because per the grant guidelines, we have to have done things like enrollment studies and facilities analysis. And boy, is it kind of serendipitous that we've been doing an awful lot of that work in the background. So we are well positioned to do this. The grant funding is up to 80% grant funding, so there will need to be some funding commitments at the local level. The only piece of bad news I have that's a potential for this is that it does say in the original, the grant guidelines that ARPA funds, the emergency relief funding, can't be used, but it doesn't say anything about ESSER funds. So I'm hopeful that municipalities can't use their funds, but that we might be able to use our funds. If we did, I would certainly be interested in having a conversation with the community. We have about $400,000 in ESSER funds. One of the suggested uses for that fund is indoor air quality. So that would be perfect. Do the math, 400,000 that we could potentially put forward, matched with 80% reimbursement, we would be well over $1 million in terms of an upgrade. In terms of how I'm proceeding now, we know that the secondary complex needs attention, right? The HVAC system up there needs work, specifically to dehumidify the air. The air that's pushed out of that system is very wet and cold, and it creates things like mildew issues, and it's otherwise not the most pleasant. It's not humidified well. We've ameliorated some of that by running lots of dehumidifiers. If you walk around the high school, you see the giant dehumidifiers running all summer, and we do that to keep the air dry. It's not how you're supposed to HVAC your schools. So I've asked Bob Shea to work with Perfect Temp to put together some specifications for how we might apply to upgrade the HVAC at the secondary school. We also know that we don't have any VAC in HVAC at Valley View, Gildersleeve, and Brownstone. We have H, certainly have heating, but we don't have really any venting or air conditioning in those schools. My concern, of course, is that we've kind of held back on any major capital improvement investments in Valley View, Gildersleeve, and Brownstone until the work of our facilities committee is done. But I think it's important for us to have a conversation about whether we would want to make any investments in HVAC, VAC upgrades at the schools. And certainly, if there was one school I would say needs it more than any, it is Brownstone. Right? Brownstone is oppressively hot, especially on that second floor. And Brownstone, even if it's not a school, is going to be something for the community. Maybe it's time to look to that, as an additional grant. So in terms of how I'm thinking about going after these grant funds, prioritize the secondary complex because we know the needs there, and that building's not going anywhere, right? If there was a second opportunity, I would suggest we might look to doing Brownstone. So stay tuned on that. That's going to be a big discussion over the next couple of months. I am going to be engaging the Buildings and Grounds Committee in that discussion, preliminary, and then, of course, sharing some ideas with the full board as the opportunity begins to crystallize. I did share a press release with a little bit of information and a link to additional information in your board folder, but we'll stop there and see if you have any questions at this point.
Oh, that's great. And has the state shared any information about, whether there's a cap on what you're eligible to apply for, or is there any more guidance around what districts could expect in terms of reimbursement? 20 to 80% is a range.
Of $150 million.
Yeah.
Right. I think a lot of it is the state's gonna largely wait and see how many districts request this. And then have seen some priorities, like how they're gonna categorize the grants, you know. We fall right into what I think are priority one, because we have, like, priority one are districts that haven't done HVAC upgrades or don't have HVAC in the past 20 years. That's us. I mean, we're there. And then from there, it's, you know, there's a schedule, like a rubric of how they will score these grants. So I'll know more on September 30th when Stephanie and I attend this webinar.
Okay.
But I think we're in a really good position to throw a hat in the ring and try to secure some of this funding.
That's great.
So stay tuned on that. Okay, so those are some 3 really good pieces of news, right? The funding is there for the technology, the architecture firm for the track, and now HVAC. So I thought I'd start with good because I have one little ominous, right? So Eric and I received from the FBI and Department of Homeland Security some kind of scary threat assessments on malware, ransomware that we can anticipate. Right? So I know Eric has spoken with Kurt in the SAR, and we're taking a look at some of the guidelines that came out about how we can harden our infrastructure and prevent some of these attacks. But you know, when you get memos like that, they get our attention pretty quick. You know, the only thing I can say now is a lot of it, yes, we can harden our infrastructure as much as we can, but a lot of it has to do with people making good decisions about what to click. Right? So Kurt shared some ideas with us about how we can test some of those systems and some of those responses, but you know, what I would say to anybody hearing me say is don't click it. Like, if you don't know where it's coming from, don't open it, don't run that file. But the threat is real and getting worse. So nothing yet, but I do want you to know we're aware of these issues that are out there, and you know, the town has been subject to this once. I hope we are, but I know Eric and our tech team is paying very careful attention to those assessments.
We don't have a big network to be able to administer from a hub, but can we do some extra training for people to not open up those and maybe test them in some way, so that they're not opening? I opened something the other day and ended up with a funny little avatar, and my computer just shut completely down. Whatever was there got stopped, but at that point, but I was in a legitimate website.
So our IT team's immediate response to Charles forwarding that email was, they've already started
the work of planning some simulations for staff, that our principals can drill with staff at upcoming faculty meetings. So, scenario, you get an email that says, the Nigerian prince is gifting you $100 million, what do you do? I mean, different scenarios, but of the same ilk.
And a lot of it, I think everybody's aware of the need, a lot of it is heightened awareness. Now is the time, everybody, be extra alert. We got this warning based on global events or whatever might be happening out there. Remind ourselves that before we open that file that's attached to that email, know where that email came from, and you know, be very thoughtful about how and if you open it.
Well, let us know if there's any additional security, cybersecurity software that we need too. I think that would be important to know.
I can just add too,
The town recently renewed our cybersecurity insurance, which the schools are nested under. I already have a phone call scheduled with our insurance representative to make sure that we're in alignment with insurance requirements, and we're looking at things like multi-factor authentication. When you try to log onto the server from outside of our buildings, you need the secondary texting code to get into the server. So we're strengthening those areas.
Scary times.
Yep. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. I think you're up. Our Director of Curriculum Instruction and Technology.
good evening, should I come to the podium?
Yes, please. Thank you. That way everyone at home can hear you too.
I know.
We're glad you're back, Aaron.
Thank you. You're back. So good evening, members of the Board of Ed. This was the first report that's in the new format that we agreed to, where I'd submit the written report ahead of time and then use this as an opportunity to field questions. I gave you a lot of information in this report, so I don't want to set precedent that they'll always be this long. But this is our first report of what has been a very active summer planning season and kickoff to the school year for us. So there's been a lot to update. I'm happy to address any specific questions or concerns that you had about the report or the format in general or anything on your mind.
Is there anything in particular that you want to highlight for us to make sure, I mean, anything to call our attention to and for anyone listening at home as well, just to kind of summarize and then maybe we can field questions?
Yeah, you know, I started with first and foremost in just acknowledging how successful the start to the school year has been. You know, Dr. Britton, myself, we've been in the buildings continually. I think that coming off of what felt like a proper summer, our students, our staff, everyone was really geared up, charged up for the school year without the specter of COVID hanging over our heads. And I think we have to remind ourselves, we only came out of masks at the end of February last year. So this is really a return to what feels like normalcy. And I think Dr. Britton struck a perfect tone at convocation of it. It's time to get back to the business of teaching and learning and advancing student achievement. Not that we ever moved away from it, but without the, you know, the necessary impediments of COVID safety. And so it's been a great start to the school year. Students seem really happy. You know, we've been in a lot of classrooms that are immediately down to academic business to start the year, which is a welcome change from where we've been in the past couple of years, again, necessarily. I would draw our attention to the November 8th PD Day. So we have contracted with a woman named Rebecca Dignan. She's a longtime Connecticut school counselor who's now started a consultancy business called Prism Counseling. She will be coming in and providing professional learning to all Portland Public Schools certified staff on supporting LGBTQ+ students. And so I included in the board packet the agenda for that day. This hits right at the heart of our commitments to equity and inclusivity in our district, and it's meeting a critical need for teachers. So the day is structured really well. We're really happy with the agenda that you put together. It's starting from the legislative guidance and requirements around supporting students in gender and sexual identity. So where there's a legal requirement or legal guidance to do so, and then from there springboarding off into what are best practices at the elementary level. We're creating a split session for our pre-K-4 teachers, and then what we consider the almost secondary and secondary level of grades 5 through 12, where identity and expression is just emerging in a different context. So best practices for supporting and creating inclusive environments. Pronoun usage, that's a big challenge for our teachers and for our community. And then she's going to end the day with common pitfalls or mistakes that educators often make in the spirit of trying to support someone. And we're looking at intersplicing those sessions with voices from the Students on the Gay Straight Alliance about what support for them means within our community. And we're just really excited to be advancing the work through professional learning of equity and inclusivity in Portland Public Schools. Maybe if I could highlight one more thing, we are scheduled for a data presentation on our student achievement data next month. I'm working right now to schedule our Board of Ed curriculum subcommittee. So thank you for completing the membership of that committee at last month's meeting. I met with Kim the other day to kind of key her into some of the work of teaching and learning.
We're going to complete it tonight.
Oh, okay.
The
Perfect.
commitments haven't been made, but they will be by the end of the meeting.
And that curriculum subcommittee is really going to help set the agenda for the types of data that the board desires, so that we're giving enough data to meet the needs and wants of the Board of Education and the public at large, and we're looking forward to presenting that information.
Can I just say one quick thing too?
Yeah, please.
There's a really important document, I think, in your folder here. I hope you've had a chance to look at it. And if not, please look at the guidebook for responding to incidents of hate and bias. Right? Eric and I had some really interesting and reflective conversations this summer where, you know, we did have situations in our schools last year where we had to respond to incidents of bias and hate speech. Both student, faculty involved. We had some pretty heavy cases, right? In those cases, you know, we didn't necessarily have a playbook to lean into, right? A lot of it was, you know, consulting with people, you know, looking to experts, but trying to, you know, respond to it in a way that was transparent, but also respecting individuals' privacy and, you know, academic and disciplinary records and personnel matters. They were very complicated when they happened. So what Eric and I decided this summer is that we looked to Learning for Justice and other organizations, and we've developed our own playbook, right, that matches some of our community approaches, but also brings in research and best practice from national organizations on this. I don't want to spend a lot of time with it tonight, but I'd love it if you read that and were comfortable with it. Eric is going to share that with the equity coordinators and get feedback from other community members. But essentially what I'm hoping is that everybody can embrace that, and by doing that, build capacity to know what we will do and how we will respond. And I say this hoping it doesn't happen, but not when, not if, but when it happens. Right? I think we have to. I don't want to expect it will happen. Please show me how to make it not happen. But you know, we live in a time where these things happen, and we are often put in a position where we need to respond. And I think it's really important for the board and the whole community to know what steps we take, how we process these incidents, how we respond to the victims and the aggressors, what disciplinary steps we take, what we do proactively to avoid it, but then how we respond when it happens. So I see this as a really important document. I would love feedback on it. I know Eric would love feedback on it. But eventually we'd like to see this as our next step from the equity lens, share it out with the community, and give everybody an insight into what administrators do when these things happen.
Yeah, and if I could just add to that, you know, school decisively. When you have incidents of or accusations of hate or bias in your school district, as Dr. Britton alluded to, they're very complex events. There's a lot of different tangled threads. And so it can often be difficult for school leaders to act with courage and confidence, and across our district and across incidents to act with coherence, right? So we know a couple of things. When there's a crisis, you want to be timely and you want to be consistent. And every time you have a subsequent crisis, you've established precedent with the crisis or crises that came before. And so we're hopeful that this guidebook does a couple of things. First, it helps us to establish practices of coherence when these incidents occur. And it's not a matter of if they'll occur, it's only a matter of when and how often. And that it gives to our leaders a vetted, for lack of a better word, approved or affirmed guidebook for how they can and should respond in those times. Because at the end of the day, it's the health of our community and the well-being of our students and families that's on the line. So we want to be able to act the right way, in a way that's consistent.
Eric, I was so impressed with this document and how thoughtful it was and how thorough it was. I really especially appreciated the overall focus on communication with students, with the community, and I really appreciated the inclusion of communication to students in that first step, like put safety first step. I think, yeah, that and the including the opportunities for anonymous reporting, like all of that fit together so nicely, and it just, it's clear that so much thought and effort went into this, and I'm looking forward to hearing what kind of feedback you get from the Equity and Inclusion Coalition, as well as other school leaders that you reach out to around this. But it seems like you're absolutely on the right track with how we hope that our administrators are able to respond to these kinds of challenges.
Thank you. You know, the work of advancing equity and inclusivity is both proactive and reactive. Unfortunately, this is a document that will guide those reactive instincts as we need to draw upon them. Just to let the board know, you know, this is going to be a very similar process to how we drafted and ultimately asked the board to approve our district equity statement. We're going to push this out, as Dr. Britton said, to a lot of different focus groups for feedback, including the Board of Ed. You'll have an opportunity to provide us formalized feedback on this document that we'll use to edit and make revisions. But I appreciate, you know, your confidence in that. What's a first draft is something that the board is relatively happy with.
It is. I would like to see the overview strengthened to what we believe. You know, use that word, and CAVE had drafted an anti-racist statement as well that we took to the NSBA and included it in their resolutions. And I'm happy to share that with you. But I think as a community, we need to say we believe that students and adults, teachers and adults, need to have an environment that's free of bias or whatever, and that's our belief, and that we will act in a swift and in a steady way when those acts and those opportunities afford themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I don't wanna say it's as easy as, but it's as immediate as a step of just anchoring it in our equity statement, which, you know, Tim, you know, we worked on that so long, it lays out those commitments, and it lays out, you know, those efforts that we take to it.
And also put it into the policy
Yeah,
language
absolutely.
as well, and that's the other part of it. I'll send you that statement if you want to.
Thank you.
Thank you, great job.
Thanks.
Really.
Are there any other questions or feedback specific to the bias incident response?
I just have a question, the graphic that you used in there with the raised fists.
Yep.
Was that among others that you chose among, or was that just one that popped
That
in,
is
or-
actually a graphic that has been in play at the secondary school since the time I arrived. There was a
It's a
fundraiser.
poster on the wall up there.
Yeah, they sold T-shirts and sweatshirts.
Yeah.
So I figured something that was already kind of in the visual frame of reference, and I think it spoke to the spirit of the document. But I'm certainly open to feedback on that as well. I think Maritza Elam had sourced it. I can't remember where she had sourced it from, but there was no copyright attachment to it.
Oh, no, no, well, some people, I've had people ask me about it, and like the raised fist is kind of like the power, kind of, you know, almost socialist, communist kind of. You see the same sort of thing in other iconography, but it doesn't, I'm not saying that's how it's used here, but there's other things that can be just as powerful but are more inclusive. Like the hand, I've seen the raised hands, where people just, all the different.
Or holding hands.
Or holding hands, there's circles of
Absolutely.
hands, there's a number of things. I always just considered that very militant, very in your face, and if that's your purpose.
No, I would say,
Use.
sort of like when we drafted the equity statement, we had
Right.
language that was perceived by some as maybe being unintentionally incendiary, and we
Right.
ultimately changed it. So that's exactly some of the type of
Right.
feedback that we're looking for, and,
Yeah.
you know, we start with something and we end up with something different by the time it goes through the filters, and, yeah,
Right.
at the end of the day, we're trying to create resources that work for our entire community, so that's what we do.
But I also just want to say, I read through it, and I found so much of it to be very valuable, and very important, and it was well presented, I think, yeah.
Thanks. And we did present it, and we're continuing to tabletop it at the leadership team meeting, and just the leadership cabinet is very grateful to have a resource like this at their fingertips. They have questions about it, but in general, they're grateful for something of this substance.
That's great.
Great work.
Are there other questions about any of the materials that Eric shared with us? Because there was a lot in there about professional development schedule, about standardized testing schedule, there's just a lot in there. Any other questions?
No, very thorough, thank you.
I just needed to justify how busy we are over the summer. No, I'm just kidding. But moving forward, I will, as I think it was a great suggestion, to highlight a couple of things within the report,
Yeah.
and then I'm happy to field questions on anything else, but are we?
I do have two little questions for
Sure.
you. The first was just about, when you were going through the goals, and our various initiatives and things you're working on right now, you referenced, or maybe this was from the professional development schedule, that, you've got PD in March, April, May around introducing, Power School to our faculty, and, I know the rollout we're aiming for fall 2023, is that right?
Yeah.
The 23-24?
It would actually go into effect July 1,
July 1.
2023 is our
Okay.
target date. That rolls over our new fiscal year. That starts the new registration process. I don't want to jump ahead of your question, but the
Yeah.
idea there is get teachers trained as close to implementation as possible. And over the summer, there's no guarantee that we'd have teachers available to be trained.
Well, that was kind of part of my question, and then the other half of it is this, the rollout, is it like a gradual introduction of Power School, or is it like a hard start on July 1st and now we're in Power School?
Both. So it's a hard rollout for the district. For teachers, there's kind of gradual increments of what they need to know and be able to do. But
Okay.
from the beginning of school, they need to know, how do I establish my grade book within Power School? So
Right.
we'll give them the functional information that, you know, is timely to how they need to access those functions. But basically why we committed such a large chunk of time to it, we're just starting to meet with our Power School reps now, not because we haven't wanted that information sooner, because they've been holding us off. So
Okay.
one of the things we worked on this summer with our professional development calendar is everything manifests in time. We could have a million initiatives, but if we don't have the time, none of them will get done. So Dr. Britton said, Power School is a great unknown in terms of the time that we're gonna have to commit. So we're just gonna look at March forward as Power School time. And if ultimately it proves to be less of a heavy lift than that for our teachers, and they don't need that much professional learning time, we'll take that time back, we'll reconvene PDEC, and we'll determine the best ways to use it.
Great. Okay, yeah, that's helpful, thank you.
You're welcome.
And then my other question was around our health and PE curricula, and you were referencing that there's work happening around incorporating these new standards from the state, and I think in one of your notes you referenced that there's some regional efforts happening with some of the districts around us, and I just was curious about that. I was excited to see it. It's something the board has talked about in a lot of different contexts over the last few years. Where can we be working with the districts around us to not have to, each of us every time reinvent the wheel? And so I'm curious what that looks like, these regional efforts around the health and PE work, and is that something that we can learn from?
Absolutely. So we made an important step last year in that we reconfigured our professional development calendar to align with what we call the Middlesex Consortium. So that's Cromwell, Middletown, East Hampton, East Chatham, Region 13. So we effectively now have the same PD days as they do in both November and February. And those are where there's opportunity for, without having to provide teachers coverage, PE and health teachers, for example, to get together across districts. That effort is happening in November. We had already provided we had already determined our professional learning plans for November, but we can certainly latch onto that work with an eye towards getting our people involved in February without contractual coverage time.
Right.
But there may be additional opportunities to release PE health teachers to meet with cross-district colleagues with substitute coverage. I met with the Middlesex Consortium folks that serve in my role in their respective districts, and it was a hot topic of our discussions. But most of our districts had already committed that November day to something of an immediate district need in our respective places, just because it's the first one on the calendar and we all kind of jump on it. I will say, in terms of that state healthy and balanced living framework, which was released in May without a lot of fanfare, it was also released without any professional learning. And if I'm going to be critical of the state, I would only say they're putting out a lot of things right now and not a lot of training, consultancy, or professional learning events around it, and that's the latest example. So there is a simmering frustration from districts about critical mass of information coming out without training and learning opportunities attendant to that information, and the framework is just one example of that.
I think CERT is trying to catch up at this point.
Well, they need to learn that everything manifests in
there's a little
time,
more
and
room.
training is the other part of that.
The literacy thing is coming at everybody too, so.
But we're digging in. Our PE health teachers spent a portion of their professional development day looking at that framework. We talked about what that means for our curriculum. We know that one of the things we need to do is push health education down further. It really only formally starts now in grade 5, and that's something we need to really strategically look at across the district.
And we have a wellness policy that we know we need to.
And a wellness
That's
Right, which is on the agenda.
Well, we fixed one part of it, but there's a whole other part to come.
Yep.
And
But
so I
thank you
guess
for
if
that
it
question.
becomes clear as as they're continuing to dive into this, if it becomes clear that there's more support needed, more resources needed for them to be able to meet this framework that's come from the state, then I hope that you'll bring that back to the board and let us know.
I will, and the good news with regional collaboration is we don't have to wait for the state, right? We can have strength in numbers regionally to advance the work ourselves, so we're certainly looking into that.
Good. Any further questions for Eric? No. Thank you so much, Eric.
Thank
This
you.
was really wonderful.
you.
I so appreciated having stuff in writing ahead of time. It helps me. All right. Excellent. Let's move on to new business. We have a slew of policies to look at. And what's nice about these is that it's all pretty easy because it's requirements. It's all
They're
mandated.
mandated. Yep.
So, here, have at it, Charles.
Yeah, I'll talk you through these. So again, there are two types of policies. There are policies that we have discretion over, and then there are policies that are grounded in state law that we do because we follow state law. All of these are of that ilk, right? So the first one here is In the last legislative session, Public Act 2280 was passed. This guarantees teachers a 30-minute duty-free lunch period, whereas previously that was subject to collective bargaining. It's the law. It is what it is. Our building principals already redesigned our schedules to make sure all of our teachers and employees have 30-minute duty-free uninterrupted lunch. So the implications of this are that we're okay. We're making it work. We're doing what we have to do. We do, of course, have to get back to the contracts at some point, because in the contract it says teachers get a lunch period equal to the student's lunch period, which in some cases is 25 minutes. We'll figure it out. We'll get back to it, whether it's an MOU or something with the various associations. We'll make it work. So what you have here in P4113.12, simple language, came from CABE, says teachers get the 30-minute uninterrupted lunch period.
And even without having updated with an MOU, without having updated the contract, it's in practice currently that every staff member is getting their 30-minute lunch.
We are following the law.
Great.
To say the law takes precedence.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, these are all first reads, so we can
Correct.
have them on a second.
Yeah, and there's nothing pressing here that we need to vote on tonight, so we'll come back to these at our next meeting.
Yep, we'll fine. So the second policy, again, grounded in Public Act 2280, an act concerning child mental and physical health services. This says for those districts that are identified by the Commissioner of Education as disproportionately high rates of truancy, which we are not identified as that, would be required to include in their policy references to the 211 hotline and other mental health support services that are available to families of students who are identified as truant. My feeling about that is even though we're not identified as this, why wouldn't we just do it? I mean, we want to provide these resources to parents, and if they can avail themselves of them and help their students improve their attendance, it's a good idea. Obviously, we all want kids in school. So it's a pretty simple change. You see in the red line in policy 511.3, we just add another number, and it's there in red for you too. Provide notice to the parent guarding the information concerning the 211 info line and other pediatric mental health behavioral screening sources and tools provided by the State Department of Education. And then, of course, the reference, legal references would need to be updated to reflect the new law. Again, kind of no-brainer, but it's something our school principals and social workers and counselors would do anyway. So it's the implications of it are not a big deal. We'd be happy to do that. Okay, so the next one then is physical exercise and discipline of students. So this will take a little bit of explaining. This law, again, Public Act 2280, states that we can't use exclusion from recess as a disciplinary tool, either because if a student is misbehaving in class or doesn't complete work, that we would deny them the ability to go to recess. I know that there is a history of practice in the district that happened. We are snuffing that out, right? We already had this prohibition, but it was in the wellness policy, which in my opinion isn't where it should be. I mean, it should be in the student section of our policy. So my recommendation is to follow the law, adopt that practice, but adopt CABE Model Policy 5114.4, which says we don't do that, and then strike it from the wellness policy. Right? So let's get it out of the wellness policy, adopt this new policy, have it in the student section, and then I'll work proactively with the administrators to make sure that we are not denying students access to recess as a consequence of things, of course, unless safety and health is involved in student conduct at recess. Any questions on that? Was a two-step there. Good. So that is where I believe you see the two policies attached. So it'll kind of be a two-step. Remove this from the wellness policy, and you see the red language in the wellness policy to strike, and then the new model CABE policy that adopts essentially exactly what it says in the wellness policy. Just doing a little cleanup, and then of course the legal references of that.
And just so everyone's clear, the red line language from the wellness policy that's been removed is very nearly word for word in the CABE model policy on recess. So all of that is protected. It's just being moved.
Yep, 100%. Then last one I have is child sexual abuse and assault policy reporting procedures. Again, this is Public Act 2287, and Act concerning identification and prevention response to adult sexual misconduct. We have a policy 5145. I've included it in here. To comply with that, we would add to that the red language. And this commits us to electronically notifying parents of how to report concerns or suspicions of child sexual abuse. We certainly can do that in our student handbooks. We can include this information on our website. We can push it out over social media. But we certainly would be happy to let parents know how, if, God forbid, they ever had a concern that either their child or another child was being abused sexually, that how they would be able to report that. I think that's all. That's it.
Were there questions on any of that? It's a lot, but it is, as Charles said, it is all mandated. We're just trying to be in compliance.
Mhm.
Any questions or comments? No. Great. So we will revisit those 5 policies at our next meeting. Is that October 4th, maybe? Is that Tuesday? I think it's Tuesday, October 4th. And we will come back to them for a vote then. Separately.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Then we can move along to old business.
I'm sorry, I have Tuesday, October 11th is the next one.
Oh, do we only have one meeting in October?
No, we have 2.
They're just on funny days?
I have skipped as well.
There we go.
I think it's Rosh Hashanah or Yom
Oh,
Kippur
good
throws us
catch.
off.
Okay,
Right.
October 11th.
October
Right.
11th,
We'll revisit
right.
those on October 11th. Good catch. All right. Old business, 2022 Board of Ed committee assignments. And so just looking at the current appointments, I don't think we're looking to necessarily, nobody reached out to me saying, I want to change my current appointments. But we have some changes we need to make to the curriculum committee. Sharon is obviously no longer on the committee, and Lauren Christensen has asked to be removed from the curriculum committee. So Stacy, Kim, you're still okay being appointed to the curriculum committee?
Yes.
Great. We're going to appoint Kim to join you, and I'm going to join you as well for the time being. So it'll be the 3 of us working on curriculum with Eric. And I think that's all we're going to do for the moment, unless there's anything anybody else wants to speak to right now. No? All right. Perfect. And we can check that off and keep moving. Committee reports. Curriculum. We'll be working with Eric just at a time. We have a committee now, which is great, and we'll be working with Eric to set a date soon. Policy.
Policy will meet on October the 12th, and we'll continue with the recommended policies in the July CAVE update. Looking forward to the November update.
Personnel has not had a meeting since our last board meeting.
It's because we worked so hard over the
Right.
summer.
We sure did. Buildings and grounds.
I suspect we'll have a meeting in the next couple of weeks once we get SLR on board for the track and have an upgrade on the HVAC. I think we talked about that with Bob Shea when we met a couple of weeks ago.
All right. Meg, correct?
CREC is meeting tomorrow at 11:30, and I will be there.
All right. Dave, any news from our Board of Selectmen?
They had a joint meeting of the water and sewer, and the big topic was looking at new water meters, kind of a public interest comment, because there's a lot of resources used to how they do it now. Somebody comes to everybody's house outside, and I guess there's a lot of leaks that are happening that aren't being tracked, things. So the new technology would change some of that, so, but it's costly, so they're gonna study it. They also introduced Ryan O'Halpin as the new Public Works Director.
That's got.
And they've asked him to be at the next meeting, so that'll be good. And then on the regular meeting on the 7th, the only notable thing they made comment of is the cost for the Zoom meetings. So they're gonna go out and determine what the costs are, because there were some concerns that are they still needed? there was some public comment on some people that said, yes, they still want them because they like that. So, and one of the other interesting things, and I particularly wrote this down, is they're looking into investing in lapel microphones because of a lot of the comments where people can't hear people talking, and it's one of my complaints because we don't always lean over and talk, and sometimes it's even hard for me to hear in the room. So I think that might be a nice improvement if we get to wear them and we don't have to worry about people not hearing us.
All right, Committee on Solidarity.
They had their meeting last week and I wasn't able to attend.
Okay.
And unfortunately, their meeting conflicts, and like their next
Sorry,
month's
I looked
meeting
that way.
is the same day as our
As our
meeting
board
at the
meeting.
same time.
Yeah.
So, but when I can get there, I'll.
Okay.
And I looked, the minutes weren't up yet from that meeting, so I wasn't able to review it.
Okay, all right. And I believe our Equity and Inclusion Coalition has not met yet. Do you have a meeting?
We met, I think we meet Thursday, is it? Thursday, yeah, I got a notice that popped up today, and I almost thought I missed it. And I realized I set myself a 2-day alarm to make sure I was up to date.
Yeah. Oh, you mentioned in your notes that you're looking for more student members.
We put out a call, we've got 4 new student voices
Coming in, and we're still working for more.
That's great.
Oh,
That's
good.
wonderful that you're getting a response there. And do you have adequate family and community
We
participants?
do. If we can increase student membership, then we might add more to keep it balanced, but we're a little adult heavy in the room, so we're trying to get more kids into balance, and then we'll reevaluate membership from there.
All right, our School Facility Study Committee.
I think we have a meeting coming up in October, and for some reason we changed it to the 17th, is what sticks in my head. But there was one final focus group at the middle school the other night, and then we will be meeting with the architect and the full body of people to come up with some final plans. It went very well. Charles and Lou have done 17 or 20 focus groups, and we have a good sense of the community desires and what they would like to see happen. So look forward to reporting it back out to the Board of Ed and Board of Selectmen.
Do you have a sense of just how soon there's going to be a recommendation coming from that committee? Are we talking like, in the next month or two?
I would say December.
Yeah.
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 You guys
yeah.
said before
Yeah.
December,
Yeah.
yeah.
We still have some work to do.
We do.
Yeah. I know you'd mentioned wanting to have
Yes.
something from the committee before you apply for the HVAC grant, and I'm just wondering if there's an interest in hurrying the timeline up, or if it's stay the course.
I think we stay the course at
Okay.
this
Yeah,
point.
I would agree.
We've done so much already. We did, since we got the extension from the Board of Selectmen, we were supposed to have this done last June, but,
Mm.
I'd rather take our time and do it right.
Sure.
So.
And I think we just, now the group has to come together and kind of really fess out where the community's at, where we're all at, where the, school personnel, we have to, so we have some lengthy conversations coming, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, we'll look forward to hearing that in December.
It'll be exciting. It's gonna be good. Guaranteed.
Stacy, you had a Youth Services Advisory Board meeting
Yeah, so
recently?
the meeting was on August 23rd. Unfortunately, I had to leave early. I missed all the good upcoming events. I missed all the good stuff. But I'm just looking over looked over the minutes, and I think they've had some change in membership because some people have moved out of town, and, some replacements were occurring, and Maggie can certainly add in. But some of the upcoming events to look at are the Monster Mash in October 22nd, Halloween on Main, looking to work with the businesses around that event to come on over, 5K. So October, very, very, very busy month of October, and the Christmas tree lighting on Sunday, December 4th. Do you want to add any more?
No,
to
you covered it.
highlights
No,
from-
I think you
Okay.
covered it. No, you did a great job. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Do we have any comments from anything for our audience of citizens? Not
CABE is gonna do a parliamentary procedure webinar on the 29th of September. If anybody's interested, it'll be available on the website for future reference, just kind of a refresher. And I just wanna thank Charles for the synopsis of each of the policy changes that came to the board. I think that was really helpful to understand where the law played into effect and what our response was. And I think that's really helpful to the full board to make the decision about policies going forward. So thank you. I appreciate that.
I agree, I think that is really helpful.
Yeah,
way to
it
present
really was, because it really was very succinct and understandable.
Yeah, that's great. Kim, any comments?
That I'm thrilled to be here, and I'm looking forward to the work ahead.
We're thrilled you're here too. Dave?
Nothing.
All right. I think we do not have any executive session items tonight. So that said, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Can I make a motion?
Thank you,
Second
Stacy.
that.
Thank you, Tim. All in favor? Aye.
This is a
It's
record.
8:02.
I think
No,
that
no,
is a
that's
record.
good.
I
It was a
have no-
record.
It is.
Yep,
I
take the
say.
quick ones when you can.
Thanks, John.